Welcome back to Global Insights. I'm your host, Alex Chen, and today we're diving deep into a battle that's quieter than any headline, but has a far greater impact on your wallet: the geoeconomic war. We're talking about how global conflict, specifically the war in Ukraine, is fundamentally reshaping the rules of finance, energy, and international trade, and what that means for the US dollar's dominance.
It's a pleasure to be here, Alex. This topic couldn't be more important. My name is Dr. Vivian Hayes, and I specialize in geopolitical risk modeling. The financial earthquake we've seen since 2022 is something we will be studying for decades.
Dr. Hayes, let's start with the basics, because it can sound quite abstract. Why should the price of, say, gas at my local pump or the interest rate on my mortgage be connected to tanks and diplomacy happening thousands of miles away in Eastern Europe?
That's a brilliant starting point. Most people focus on the human tragedy, which is paramount, but beneath that, a profound financial battle is taking place, what the analysts are calling the geoeconomic war. It's fundamentally about supply chains and the plumbing of global finance. When a major commodity exporter like Russia is suddenly restricted, it doesn't just affect them. It causes a supply shock for things like energy, fertilizers, and raw materials.
So less supply globally equals higher prices for everyone. That's the classic boomerang effect, right?
Exactly. And the most powerful weapon being wielded in this war is not a missile, it's the US dollar.
The dollar. It's been the undisputed global reserve currency since Bretton Woods in 1944. It's what most global trade is settled in. But when the sanctions hit Russia, the West used this dominance as a weapon in a way we hadn't really seen before.
They pressed the financial nuclear button, so to speak. The first move was cutting key Russian banks off from SWIFT, the messaging service that facilitates trillions in global payments. But the truly symbolic rule-breaking move was the freezing of roughly $300 billion in Russian hard currency reserves held in Western institutions.
That's staggering. Reserves are supposed to be a nation's insurance policy, their sovereign wealth. When they were frozen, what signal did that send to the rest of the world?
A clear and disturbing one. Your reserve assets are conditional, not absolute. For countries that might have tense relationships with the US or the West, China, India, Turkey, and others, it was a definitive wake-up call. It made them realize that relying solely on the dollar meant exposing their entire financial stability to the political will of one jurisdiction.
I like the analogy in the source material. If the global economy is a real-time strategy video game, the US not only created the board, but can pause the game and confiscate a player's assets. That level of authority has created the pushback we are now seeing, the acceleration of de-dollarization. Let's talk about that de-dollarization. It's often sensationalized. People hear the dollar is collapsing, but it's more nuanced than that. How's this really playing out on the ground?
It's not a sudden collapse, but a gradual structural shift towards monetary multipolarity. Russia and China, facing off against the West, have been the main architects. Today, reports suggest that over 95% of trade between Russia and China is now settled directly in yuan or rubles. That's trade volume that completely bypasses the dollar and the SWIFT system.
Which is significant because Russia is one of the world's largest commodity exporters, and China is the largest buyer. They're creating their own financial ecosystem.
Exactly. And this brings us to the BRICS Plus group. It started as Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but with the addition of key energy exporters like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran, the group now controls a huge chunk of global GDP and, crucially, global oil supply.
So if they push for oil to be traded in currencies other than the dollar, say the yuan, or a basket of currencies, that strikes right at the heart of the petrodollar system.
It does. The main agenda for BRICS Plus is establishing an alternative payment mechanism to challenge Western dominance. Again, it's not about the dollar vanishing tomorrow, but about a growing number of major nations using it less frequently. It's chipping away at the foundation.
Now let's pivot to the emotional and practical side for our listeners. This high-level geopolitical chess game has real impacts on the everyday person. We mentioned inflation. The energy battle is clearly the fuel for that, right?
Absolutely. The disruption of Russian gas flows to Europe caused energy prices to soar. When energy costs more, everything costs more. Transporting goods, manufacturing products, heating homes. That translates directly into the high inflation, or even the fear of stagflation, that we've all experienced.
Stagflation being high inflation combined with economic stagnation, the worst of both worlds. It forces central banks like the Fed to raise interest rates to cool inflation, which in turn slows down growth and makes your debt more expensive.
That's the tightrope walk they've been on. And that brings us to the practical application for listeners' personal finances. In this volatile, fragmented environment, what should people be doing?
What's your actionable advice for managing this geopolitical risk in their portfolios?
My main advice is diversification and resilience. First, understand that the dollar's strength is a double-edged sword. Good for U.S. imports, but it makes dollar-denominated debt more expensive for the rest of the world and creates global uncertainty. Second, invest in real assets, things that traditionally fare well during inflation. Think gold, select real estate, or commodity ETFs.
So assets that aren't just paper promises.
Precisely. And third, look for opportunities in the structural changes we discussed. The energy transition is accelerating because Europe needs new, secure power sources. That means massive, long-term investment opportunities in renewable energy and energy security sectors. Exporters like the US and Qatar are benefiting from the LNG boom. Don't just focus on the disruption, look for the reorientation.
That's a good point. Sanctions create inefficiencies, but they don't stop trade. They just reroute it, creating new winners and losers along the way.
Exactly. You need to be aware of where those new trade routes, the beneficiaries of this fragmentation, are.
Dr. Hayes, this has been an incredibly insightful dive into the geoeconomic shockwave we're experiencing. To summarize the key lessons for our listeners, 1. The U.S. dollar is now a conditional asset, meaning sovereign reserves aren't immune to politics. 2. Sanctions create massive distortions, which we feel directly as inflation in our wallets. And 3. This geopolitical dynamic is forcing a reorientation of trade towards new blocs like BRICS+, demanding more expertise and diversification from all of us.
That's a perfect summary, Alex. The takeaway is that you can no longer afford to be a passive observer of world events. Knowledge is your best shield against volatility. Prioritize resilience, manage your geopolitical risk, and stay informed.
Dr. Vivian Hayes, thank you so much for breaking down these complex concepts with such clarity.
My pleasure, Alex.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Global Insights. Until next time, stay vigilant and stay diversified. Reflective music swells and fades out.